Atlanta is a complex show, which is pretty obvious if you've seen it, but my favorite thing about it is the way it uniquely tackles character development in the subtle way all 4 of the main protagonists change over the 4 seasons. It's never surface level, and it always displays the character's inner soul by the situations they get into or the characters they meet in their day-to-day lives. If you ask me if Atlanta had a plot, you get a yes in response. You would think the show is about a rapper trying to make it big in the Atlanta rap scene, and while yes, it is that, it's used as the backdrop to tell the actual story. But you can't easily piece together the intricacies by itself, especially for the main characters, whose stories overlap each other, and can't be fully understood until you've linked moments and scenes over the course of the whole show. But that's why I want to figure out one of those stories today, because after finishing Atlanta for a second time, the character I connected to the most was Alfred, aka Paper Boi. And the episode where I found his complexity the most interesting was the season 2 episode Woods. In most shows like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, or The Sopranos, there usually is an episode where 2 characters get stuck together in a big vast environment, and we usually learn a lot about them along the way. And it's kind of become a trope at this point, but what if we had that character completely alone? How would you as a writer use the bad situation you've put this character in against himself, but still show who he really is on the inside? Well, I'll answer that, but first, I want to examine Alfred as we've come to know him before this episode.
Yeah, handful of grams, other handful of them bands. Hey, handful of grams, other handful of them bands.
When we are first truly introduced to Alfred in the first episode, it is through his cousin Ern's eyes when he finds out about Alfred's rap career and hopes to manage him. But you could see once he gets there, Alfred isn't so easily accepting of someone who wants to manage him. And Darius, he's just kinda there.
Cookie? Thanks.
Alfred's fear and lack of trust is completely understandable once you find out how he sees things as a well-known rapper once the show starts focusing on him. You could see how weird people treat Alfred, either be the completely unaware fans, or the people riding off of him for clout, or just the downright scary people. The way this show portrays fame isn't how you normally see it done elsewhere. In this show, it's gross and exploitative and completely disvalues the person under the Paper Boi mask. Sure, he could have nice things be done for him, like getting wings with the lemon pepper wet for free, but it's always left with the undertone of unimaginably high expectations.
If you let me now, I don't know what I'd do.
All these events that happen to Al are easily ignorable and probably would just feel like a surreal experience to most people before they move on, but combining them all in conjunction is just simply bad and no way to live. Everything I just described all takes place in just one day an episode for the show too, and this is a constant struggle he has to deal with during the duration of the rest of the series, on and off screen. So it's pretty easy to understand why Alfred doesn't accept Ern so fast. What if he's just another grifter there just to get money and ride off of his success? But it can be seen as a bit odd when Alfred does let him become his manager. Sure, it was because Ern proved his worth by getting Alfred's song on the radio, but I think it's worth looking at the episode Fubu to describe Ern and Alfred's relationship before that to give perspective on the present. If you can't tell by now, this episode takes place years before the show starts, and it showcases a younger Ern who excitedly wears a Fubu shirt to school until another student shows up with the same shirt as him but with a slightly different design, which causes some boys to harass both of them until they find out which one of them has the bootleg version. This causes Ern to beg for Alfred's help, and I have to say, I love the anxious, shaky, out-of-focus cinematography in the portrayal of public school in this episode. It is Atlanta at its best. Anyways, we see a more confident and loud Alfred here, who is extremely intelligent and will use the rules the way he wants to, and his intelligence comes to good use when he supposedly proves the validity of Ern's shirt just from his confidence. We can see that the persona he puts on has been one he has been using since he was a child, even if it's more subtle now, so it makes perfect sense he'd be a rapper in the present day. But Alfred saving Ern from the boys causes the other kid to get harassed and bullied, literally until he goes onto the bus home. And then, the next day, he commits suicide. Which, what this does has a bunch of implications for Ern, but what it means for Alfred and Ern's relationship is different and what I want to focus on. This is sandwiched between 2 episodes that focus heavily on the relationship between Alfred and Ern. After Ern's dismal failure to keep things together as a manager in the episode previously, titled North of the River, Alfred, with the help of another rapper's manager, plans to go on tour, which Ern had no help in setting up. So this already does not have him in the good graces of Alfred, but unlike anyone else in the music industry, Ern has loyalty. If he could crawl to a managing position once, he could do it again. In the season 2 finale, after a whole day of frantic packing and keeping everyone in check for the tour, the team is ready to board the plane. Ern, with his partners beside him, goes through his bag when they get to the metal detectors, and then he accidentally brought the golden gun that was given to him from Katt Williams earlier in the season. I forgot the character's name. Anyways, when Katt Williams gives Ern this gun in the season 2 premiere, he says,
"You're gonna need this in the music business."
Which is true, just not in an expected way, because without any hesitation, Ern instinctively puts the gun in the rap partner's bag and boards the flight with Alfred sitting beside him, who tells him he noticed what he did and he tells Ern how much it means to him. Alfred could have all the money in the world, but loyalty and trust matters the most, because sometimes that's all you could have that means something in Atlanta. This place might be unforgiving, relentless, and will go out of its way to break you, but if you have the loyalty of someone, you could get far. But what happens when you're completely alone?
Get up. You know good and well I did not raise a son this lazy.
When the episode Woods opens, we witness Alfred eyes wide shut on the couch in his messy house, while his mom appears like a ghostly figure in the background berating him for not cleaning. And just like a voice in his head, he tunes her out and wakes up hours later alone, and with his phone buzzing in his ear, which he begrudgingly answers and finds his Ern asking him how he's doing, and Alfred opts for the usual,
Yeah, man, I'm okay.
which is something you'll find that is super common when someone asks how he's doing during any point in the show. He will always go for the quick and easy answer, but I feel it's because mainly he doesn't really feel like he needs to share this with other people, because it wasn't even like Ern called him just to check up on him. It was to ask about some forms he needed to fill out, which Alfred apathetically tells him he will complete. And as he hangs up the phone and lays there looking in the direction of where his mother was, after a few seconds he decides to ignore it while he stares at the ceiling unmoving. This intro says a lot about Alfred and his personality in general. I'll get back to this later though, because after sitting on the couch for hours, Alfred decides to go and meet up for a quote-unquote date with a girl named Sierra, which we haven't seen anywhere prior to this episode. While they sit in the car together, she tells him that it's nice to just do something that isn't just photo shoots, and it's nice to just be around someone who gets it, which Al actually agrees with, although the tone almost changes in the car when his song, well, his only song I guess, starts playing. You could almost ever so subtly almost see him ask to turn it off. That is before she hypes his music up and he smiles looking out the window. And this is honestly one of the very few times we do see Alfred smile. But I don't feel it's from the song, it's more from the validation he gets from having someone similar to him praise his music. It's not like he even enjoys her company though, which is evident even before this interaction, but it suddenly gets more aggravating after this. She tells him that he needs to build a brand with his clothing, she takes pictures with fans while Alfred watches, she tells him he needs to post more, and then in the salon she offers to start dating to combine their brands, which Alfred does not like because he does not want to play the role of the fake celebrity like she has, and he would, in his words, prefer to keep it real, which Sierra points out is already what he's not doing, being on the radio and making money, which already aggravates him combined with everything before. But what pushes him over the edge is when she takes a photo of both of them together to post online, which he asks her to delete, and she won't. So after arguing for a few seconds, he decides to leave after she mocks him for trying to be real.
I drove.
I can walk, ho.
So let's talk about the dichotomy Sierra plays alongside Alfred. She is someone who's fully accepted and plays into her role as a celebrity, but in a way that is completely antithetical to how Alfred views being one. If pushing others around and having an ego bigger than mine after beating the first boss in Dark Souls 3 is what it means to be a celebrity, why even be one? But when you're this far in the game, is that even an option? As Alfred walks back home, he meets a group of teenage boys who uncomfortably tell him how much they love his music. Then, after the awkward praise, they ask him what he's doing out here, and when Alfred asks why he isn't allowed to walk, just like Sierra, these boys almost mock him by repeating back to him that he's keeping it real. And as Alfred looks around the environment as the boys surround him on both sides, the inevitable happens. This is the price for being real in Atlanta. As we watch this gruesomely realistic robbery, one of the boys takes out a gun which Alfred uses all of his strength to keep out of his face as he ignores the other two boys taking out his valuables, and eventually he headbutts the boy with the gun onto the pavement. This wasn't enough though, as he shoots his gun at Alfred, whose only option is to run into the woods to escape, and eventually after the taunting voices fade, he's stuck alone in the woods. Just like the current life he has been living, the lifeless forest seems to represent the unchanging, unmoving, and quietly suffering purgatory of his life. While continuously walking through the woods, he eventually stumbles upon a deer's corpse with its guts sprawled out of his stomach, and then he hears a familiar gospel melody, which is the same one his mother sang in the beginning of the episode, and eventually the only living thing here appears, a hobo who relentlessly follows and taunts Alfred. And while watching this, it reminded me of a certain character from an episode later on in the show called New Jazz. While in Amsterdam with Darius, the duo decide to try some hallucinogenic drugs only available in Europe while they walk around the city. This quickly escalates though, as Darius walks off and quietly disappears from the episode. Similar to the robbery in the woods episode, 3 boys follow Paper Boi, but this time he's avoidant of both of them and hides away in a dark building until they eventually pick the next victim. But as he peeps through the slight crack in the door, he hears someone crying profusely behind him. So he cautiously walks back into the dark building he's entered, and he finds a woman crying in the center of the room. As he approaches the woman to see if he could help, she looks at him confused and nudges him to look at the people watching him, until he slowly realizes he's watching a performance. So after awkwardly walking out of that encounter, he finds himself in a museum, and without any time to get a bearing on his surroundings, he's interrupted by a woman behind him, who goes on similar tangents criticizing him like his mother and the hobo, and this woman goes by the name Lorraine. The place Alfred is placed in has similar thematic importance as it did with the Woods episode, but to understand this, I want to go very quickly back to an episode only 3 episodes prior, titled Cancer Attack. After a performance, Alfred loses his phone, and their only suspect is a creepy fan who won't directly tell the team if he has their phone or not, which is infuriating to watch because of how easily he reads them. So Alfred, in an attempt to connect to him on an emotional level, tells them that the past few months he's just lost his ability to even rap. And he says that he was never even into rapping at all, and now that's all he does, and that's all he'll ever be known for. But before the concert, he just found his voice again, and he just followed it and recorded it on that phone, so that's why he needs it back, because he fears he won't find that voice ever again. But instead of the fan giving him a direct answer, he ignores Alfred and tells him that when he heard the Postal mixtape, he didn't empathize with it, he felt the same exact way. And surprisingly, he was the inspiration for the song he wrote, and eventually sings to Alfred in this episode. I feel the lyrics to the song he sings are meant to be taken from a place that reflects back onto Alfred, and represents what he feels he cannot himself write. So that's why when he finishes the song, Alfred just sits there as the fan doesn't give him any closure on his missing phone and walks out of the room. Alfred's tracks aren't personal and they aren't him. Even when he says he's trying to keep it real, his art is not wholehearted. And that's why I think, at least a little optimistically, from a literal perspective, the fan shows that he has the ability to inspire, and he has that creative voice inside of himself somewhere, even if it's implemented onto another character. So just like the woman crying, everything we see is performative and meant for the audience to see. But there's also sides and angles to Al we'll never see or understand, and this song he talks about is a facet of that complexity. One of my favorite things about Alfred is, unlike most shows, he is not the vain, egotistical artist, because he doesn't even seem to like his own work, even with the success it has brought him. And that's one of the things I connected the most with his character, minus the success, obviously. That seems to be a part of what Lorraine represents, and that is the shallow artist he thinks he is, compared to what he actually is. So that's why Alfred is planted into a museum when he first meets her, while she criticizes and disparages all of the art around them, and then eventually Alfred. Throughout the episode, Alfred follows Lorraine, who acts as a guide for him in Amsterdam. They eventually make it to a bar, and just like when they were walking through the red light district, she eventually disappears, and Alfred sits in a bar full of canceled celebrities with Liam Neeson, which I won't explain. But right as the man on stage sets up a performance for someone in the bar, Lorraine pulls him out of there right before the spotlight could hit him, which I think is some subtle foreshadowing to Alfred's career later in the show. But as they reach outside of the bar, Lorraine celebrates getting Alfred out of that performance, but Al coldly rejects her, and he tells her that there is no reason for him to trust her when all she does is shit on him. But she tells him that she says what he needs to hear, not what he wants to hear, as she rattles off all the things wrong with his surroundings. But most importantly, how he isn't the one who handles his masters. And as Alfred questions how she even knows anything, she answers with a response that literally puts Alfred in a trance-like state and makes him lose his ability to move or scream. All he can do is slump to the floor as Lorraine empathetically puts a blanket over him and disappears. As he eventually falls over onto the street, the screen cuts to black, and we wake up with Alfred in his hotel room with Ern sitting by his side. And he tells Alfred that he's been passed out for 10 hours. But that's not what matters to Alfred, because he asks where Lorraine is, and Ern confusedly says,
Your mom?
This woman who has been following Alfred around this whole episode is the same mother who passed away before the show began, and the same mother who berates him in the beginning of Woods. His mother is used twice in the same hallucinogenic way throughout the show, and she has the same thematic importance tied to her. I think it's pretty easy to assume Alfred does have a toxic relationship with his mother, but she has importance in Alfred's subconscious, both as a coping strategy and a way to keep him alive, even if that voice she gives is a toxic one. It's Lorraine that helps him stay hidden from the spotlight, it's Lorraine that makes him question if he owns his music, and it's Lorraine that tells him to pick up his trash and live properly. But it's also this voice that serves as a way to torment Alfred. There's probably a reason Alfred is as quiet as he is compared to how he was portrayed when he was younger, and that's probably because these words and the environment he lives in has taken its toll on him, as it would for anybody. Characters like Lorraine are used in the show frequently, and they are meant to be taken as literally as possible. Their only purpose is to give the character exactly what they need to hear at the right moment, but the element I love about it is the broken realism. They could act realistically, but they could also literally break apart through the interaction and turn into a broken NPC, making it feel like the script and world the characters live in is glitching and breaking apart. So that's why characters like this don't need to be seen as a real person, but as an entity and a representation of Alfred's subconscious. And they are all represented as different characters throughout the series, but they are all connected in a vague way. And I guess you could say I was being a bit deceptive about who the fan was when I was talking about him. He may be an inspired fan, but just like most characters Al meets, he's a reflection of himself. Throughout the episode, there are a bunch of hints that this fan is Alfred. Not literally, but he is, as I said, a reflection of Alfred. During the episode, it's really hard to nail down who this mystery fan is. You can't get a solid answer out of him, and that's what makes this partially hilarious to watch as you try to get an answer out of him. But the one common link I could find about who he is his connection to Alfred. He knows Alfred's history in high school, he has the same phone number as Alfred, and most interestingly, his name is Wiley, which is almost the same name as the hobo from the woods, whose name is Whaley. But what I think is really cool here is he also serves as a mirror for whoever he talks to, particularly when he speaks to Ern. Anyways, going back to the song Wiley sings, this is the artist Alfred inspires to be, and truly is based off of the lyrics, where Wiley declares, "You are my mirror, my best friend, we used to be one and the same," which means that his art used to have real effort and love put into it, and this is also what the other side is in the song, and that's real whole art. But when the song climaxes, the song takes a turn when Wiley sings, "I don't want more of you." This is literally writer's block as a person, and also the genuine side of his artistry that has been buried up behind the Paper Boi persona, because he was taught to embrace it because of his time in Atlanta, and because of the hobo in the woods. Like all of these specters we've seen Alfred interact with, the hobo cannot be reasoned with until he's given the lesson he needs to give to Alfred, and like a voice in his head, he can't be ignored and pushed away like Alfred attempts to do with this man, until it brings him close to death. As the sun sets and all that's left is invisible streams of light through the tree branches, Alfred still walks through the forest determined to find a way out. But even with the hours of painstaking walking, he still circles back to where the deer's corpse is, while the hobo behind him stands, mocking him, saying that's what he is going to end up as. And because of his stubbornness to change, the hobo points out how he's just like his mother. Alfred fears inheriting the same pessimistic, negative traits of his mother, because her negative energy still lives in his subconscious somewhere. Even if that energy is used as a realistic voice of reason to help Alfred move forward, but it also constrains him to believe what is not there. As Alfred sits exhausted on the tree branch and tells the hobo he needs time to think, the hobo tells him he needs to decide how he will get out of here and make that decision now. And when Alfred again doesn't listen, the hobo swiftly puts a box cutter around his neck and tells him that if he keeps standing still, he will die. The streets of Atlanta are represented in this hobo. They are cold and only care for the clothes on your back and the money in your wallet. What he's saying is, time does not wait for anyone. He's also telling him he cannot be Alfred anymore, and to survive on the streets of Atlanta, he doesn't need to just get up and move now, but he needs to change everything about himself, because he will not survive until Paper Boi is embraced. It's only when he is pushed into action by this hobo, his will to survive kicks in, and he runs and runs until his feet eventually go from running over snapping tree branches to running on solid concrete. But even after escaping and finding the bright lights of a gas station, it still doesn't take away from what he just experienced. As the dirty and bloody Alfred cools off inside of the gas station, humming the same melody of the ghost-like characters that he has encountered, Alfred is approached by a fan like usual, but instead of the fan initiating the contact, this time, Alfred asks if he wants the picture. You could see him embrace his persona like he was told to, because without it, he will end up dead and forgotten. So all he could do now is smile through the pain. The thing I love most about the show is the unique off-the-wall surrealism that still also feels completely accurate to our reality. The show is not meant to be taken literally, because what we see is something that is still possible, but it's the farthest extent that you could take a certain situation while still being realistic. There's definitely an awkward, angering, and mind-boggling moment that you yourself can relate to while watching this, and that's the point. The show in of itself is inherently political, but it's shown and viewed in a way where you're supposed to question why things are the way they are, and you could take the message of a certain episode or scene in any way you want, and that's how art like this should be talked about and made. The show relies on a poetic and deeply surrealist type of storytelling, where every object and thing has inherent meaning and subtext to the broader world surrounding these characters. But at the same time, the show is also straightforward in its style, where every person these characters encounter is the biggest exaggeration you could get from that specific stereotype, leaving you with a sense of uncomfortability and unease. I, of course, can't relate to the show entirely, but I can relate to the feeling the characters betray, like Ern, Alfred, Darius, or Van. The show has a way of making the untold thoughts real thoughts. The reality surrounding these characters is not made for them, but the way the world sees them is. The show is very broad and has many meanings and things to take away from it, like racism or, racism, I guess. But the thing I connect to the most is the frantic, unreal, dystopic, not of this world, but also normal, casual, modern day energy the show portrays. The show is not literal, but it is in the way it feels to embody fear.
Something off.
And the environment of fear is reverberated in episodes like Crank That Killer, where Al's life is put in even more danger because of how high his Paper Boi persona has risen. Although it isn't stated directly that the mall shootout was the reason for Al to buy a safe farm in the ensuing episode, I bet that's the best interpretation to take from it. So now we have finally reached the place I've been dying to talk about. The place where Alfred's trauma and fear resolves, all because of a hog and a frying pan. And yes, it'll make sense when I get to it. Like most episodes that star Alfred, he is completely alone, but unlike the other times, this is all by choice. Alfred happily embraces his isolation, even from the people closest to him like Ern, and it's not hard to see why after everything he has been through throughout the show. But even with the newfound peace repairing abandoned tractors, I guess, problems still arise in the form of hogs going after Alfred's marijuana stash that he's been growing since the beginning of Season 4 because of a rapper Alfred used to be a fan of named Blue Blood. In the Season 4 premiere, after Alfred finds out about the death of this rapper, he embarks on a scavenger hunt that leads him to a makeshift funeral whose only attending member is Blue Blood's wife, who gives him the marijuana that he could grow as a thank you for coming.
Track 11 is how to care for it.
That's dope.
Even with all that fame, it still did not matter much in the end when Blue Blood doesn't use his fame in a way that any other basic celebrity would have, so his career just kind of disappeared from the public eye. And this point is repeated in the episode Born to Die, where Alfred goes to a meeting of aging rappers who explain that to stay relevant, they need to use a white kid to catapult their career back to stardom, unless they want to end up like Blue Blood and downsize their career while living in the middle of nowhere, which is exactly what happens to Alfred even with the attempt to crawl back into relevance in this episode. Blue Blood is the perfect antithesis to Alfred. In the state of his career, he might have been well regarded, but his time has passed. So like I said earlier about Alfred being gone from the spotlight, his celebrity status is now faded, and Alfred seems to be completely fine with that, because the spotlight obviously never did much good for him anyways. But even out of the spotlight, he's still being attacked in the form of the hogs I mentioned earlier going after the weed he is growing, which seems to represent his last piece of respect and realness he has for his career. So like Blue Blood, Alfred will fight as hard as he can to keep the authenticity after keeping it buried for so long. But before that can happen, he has to suffer to get to that point. After Alfred repairs his tractor and it crushes on top of him, he wakes up hours later with his foot broken and his farm far off but viewable in the distance. So Alfred's only option is to relentlessly crawl his way to safety. Now, what's significant about this, and what would definitely go unnoticed by me if it wasn't in the title of the episode, is this scene's association with the painting Christina's World from Andrew Wyeth, which portrays a woman sitting in a field staring at a farmhouse in the distance, and that scene is obviously being played out here, but what's the significance of it? There's many interpretations to take from the painting. The one I think resonates the most with this episode and Alfred is the pursuit of the human spirit beyond what we think is possible through isolation. Because like Alfred, the painting portrays a real disabled woman crawling without the assistance of anything or anyone. And in many ways, this painting has lost its symbolic importance for the way Alfred feels about himself throughout the whole show. From the beginning, Alfred has viewed being a celebrity as a confusing whirlwind of people that just try to use him in various ways. And even his own art and persona was being used against him just to deliver the safest, cleanest rapper persona that doesn't interfere with anyone's presumptions of what a rapper is. All he can have is a far-off goal in the distance of obtaining the authenticity and realness back, because that's all that is there that matters. But it's not an easy journey to get that back, as while Alfred is mercilessly crawling back, he spots his package being delivered at his home, so he screams and pleads for help.
Hey! Hey! Oh, come on, bitch, I know you see me. Hey! 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 Shit!
But as Alfred will soon find out, no help is coming. His self-imposed isolation has come at the cost of him having no help beside him. But like usual, he persists through the darkness, and as he makes it to the door of his farm and breathes a sigh of relief after opening his package with a frying pan and throwing it to the side, he faintly hears the snorting of an animal nearby. Then he looks out into the darkness and sees the animal that has been terrorizing his crops, and with one quick glimpse, the hog charges at the injured Alfred. This is it, life or death. There's no getting out of this. So as Alfred wrestles with the hog and eventually gets it on the ground, he eventually grabs the frying pan, and without any reliance on a supernatural figure to torment him and push him towards what he needs to accomplish, this time, he defeats that figure all by himself. Without much time to think, Alfred hears his phone vibrate in the distance, and as he crawls to his phone on the kitchen counter, he answers it, and...
Yo.
Hey, what's up, man?
Chillin', man, chillin'.
Yeah.
Much like Alfred's journey throughout the show, most of, if not all of it, is experienced in isolation, much of it without choice, but also with choice, because of Alfred's lack of any attempt to explain anything to anyone, and that seems to be what is happening again here. Alfred and all the characters throughout the show have the idea that they don't need to be helped. And maybe in this case, that is true, as the situations that the characters get into are so unexplainable, so how would he even talk about it? And in Alfred's case, he never does. He starts his story off alone, and he finishes it alone. But he finishes it by protecting what is most important to him, his integrity, represented by the plants of the forgotten but respected rapper that kept it real to the end. In this way, Alfred frees himself from the trepidations of living in fear as a celebrity. Throughout the episode, his rejection of Ern wasn't out of spite or hatred, but it was done out of his need to self-isolate and get a grasp on who he is. But now, he feels comfortable returning to the people he could trust the most, which doesn't seem like what is going on at first as Alfred rejects Ern once again. But the next day, Alfred sits down overlooking the sunrise and just simply talks to Ern. Just like the kids they were seen on the couch being told to stick together, they sit here in the present day having gone through all the tribulations of the music industry and society in general, happy. And now, against all expectations of the evil world Alfred lives in, he could just openly laugh and be free with Ern, and he earned it, pun intended. Like most episodes in season 4, or the whole show in general, the stories are so subtle you can't really find out the arc of a character until rewatch. And my favorite thing about it is that somehow all these surrounding characters with many different feelings and personalities somehow collide into the show. Their character arc could be simple like Ern, who is a man trying to prove himself because of the racism and abuse he's received, and finally finding the success and love he's wanted in life. Or it could be a character arc like Darius, where he falls into a world of drugs after the death of his brother, leading him to not know but accept his surreal reality, just to feel closer to his brother. Or it could be something more subtle like Alfred, where the fame that his career has brought him has made him see what's fake and what's important in life. But the commonality all these characters share is finding peace in themselves. And for Alfred, well, he could finally peacefully move out of the Paper Boi persona and live in his own world. I usually reserve these one-on-one segments for if there is something I really need to say, and I'm gonna be honest, there is nothing to really say, and that's the problem. I'm kinda in a dry spot creatively at the moment, but not in a bad way. It's in a way where I'm questioning how and why I do what I do. And that's good because I need to improve my craft, and I need to improve the things I make and say creatively, because honestly, the sky's the limit. But at the moment, I feel constricted from the things I've already done and where I have put myself creatively. I'm not sure if I want to make essay videos, you know, but I like talking and analyzing the things I like. And it's honestly a privilege to even get the opportunity to waste my own time making shitty, kind of soulless videos you'll forget about in 2 seconds, so I could vaguely chase the approval and completeness I desperately want, because we have to remember guys, I'm an artist, and whatever I leave behind shows who I am, and everything that I've seen, experienced, and felt will be forgotten, and the people that act like that isn't true already have received everything they've ever wanted from their career and life. And maybe that's why I chose to talk about this, because it feels personal and reflective on art and being an artist, you know? It doesn't make sense, and it probably never will, but all I can do is be optimistic that I will find that peace and acceptance like Alfred. But everyone's creative journey is different and is their own, and that's the paradox. But I guess if there was something I had to say, it's that anyone you watch or listen to has probably gone through those same creative struggles, but it's not always evident on the surface, and suffering in silence is just as valid, because I feel like everyone has some piece of Alfred inside of them. It just can't be explained through words, so that's why it's so awe-inspiring when I do see something I feel pulls it off in some way. But anyways, thank you for watching my silly little YouTube video, and I just released Ice Crisp Meal 7, which is a series about me and my close friends competing to eat horrible food items so that we could avoid suffering whatever weird punishment I come up with. So the link is in the description for that. And if you want to stick around, I'm planning on making another Atlanta video and a video about an unspecific death from The Last of Us Part 2. Or you could just check out my channel, which has many videos like this one, but it's okay if you don't love me and you don't watch my videos. I'll just go cry. Bye-bye.
You don't have that, guess what? You're fucking white.